Today, I have John Kiriakou to go through some of the biggest stories in the news. John, thank you for joining me again.
My pleasure, Stephen. Good to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much for coming back. By the way, congratulations on going on the Joe Rogan Experience. That was
Thank
amazing.
you. That was so much fun. I'll tell you, I looked forward to it for such a long time. And I had hoped for such a long time that I would come to his attention. And then when I finally did, it was a great conversation. And he treated me like a king, to tell you the truth.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, congrats on that. So just so my audience has some background, John Kiriakou, in my opinion, is a national hero, former CIA. He was the whistleblower on the torture program under George W. Bush, John Brennan from the CIA that made Trump's life a living hell. He also made John's life a living hell. He's also a writer and author and the host of multiple podcasts. I want to jump into this first story with you. You've probably seen this. It's now come out just in the last 24 hours that the fraud committed by this group of Somalians in Minnesota is now well over $1 billion.
Yes.
And they're not defrauding the American government and taxpayer in order to buy houses here in America or feed their children or something like that. Most of that money is being funneled back to Somalia into terrorist organizations. What were your thoughts when you first saw this story coming out?
My first thoughts were that, oh, this is going to be very easy to prosecute. But that's not where the story has gone. Where the story has gone is that Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic governor of Minnesota, knew that this was happening because as many as 400 state employees attempted to blow the whistle on it and to report it to state authorities. And what did Walz do? He went after the whistleblowers. Unforgivable.
Yeah. I mean, so this is kind of what I've been learning is they knew about the fraud, but they needed the Somalia vote. The Somalia vote was the tipping point. And so they allowed these people to steal taxpayer money and commit fraud in order to get votes.
Yeah. To me, that is a prosecutable felony. And if I were Tim Walz, I would be looking for an A-list criminal defense attorney right now. Because you're right. It's not just an issue of the fraud, right? Money. Okay, well, yeah, that's bad enough. It's an issue of diverting the money to a bona fide terrorist group. And not just a terrorist group, but a terrorist group that has killed Americans. Unforgivable, as I said a few minutes ago.
Yeah. So over the weekend, this is a mostly Democrat-run organization, Minnesota Department of Human Services employees. They put out Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. It's now over $1 billion. That's what we know about. They went on to blast him. They're now starting to show the receipts online. As of going on this show today, that post has been seen by over 33 million people. Now President Trump is saying, why aren't we arresting Tim Walz? Why is he not stepping down? Why are we allowing more people from Somalia to come here and defraud the American people? Do you think that we will see anything happen to Tim Walz, or did the Democrats protect the Democrats and nothing comes of it?
You know, in any other situation, I would have to reluctantly tell you that we probably wouldn't see anything happen to Tim Walz. But this situation has been so quickly federalized that it would be a crime to not prosecute Tim Walz, right? He knew about it. At the very least, it makes him complicit. And so this is not a partisan issue here, Stephen. This is an issue of right and wrong. There are crimes being committed against the American people, not just the crime of fraud, but support for terrorism, which is a very serious crime, a very serious felony. He did nothing about it. So we have to prosecute those Minnesotans, Somalis or not, who participated in both the fraud and in the support for terrorism. And then Tim Walz is going to have to answer to higher authorities.
What I think what is disturbing to me is this is the guy that was nearly the vice president of the United States. I mean, I think Kamala Harris is not very intelligent and not geared up to be a leader at the highest levels of government.
Agreed.
That to the side, this dude is complicit in defrauding American workers.
That's right.
Like, they work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. They are forced to hand over money to the state of Minnesota and the federal government. And then you find out that the governor it knowingly allowed this to happen so that he could stay in power.
There's no upside to this. There's no way that he can flip this to his benefit. It's not possible. We're talking about multiple crimes, serious crimes, felonies. He's going to have to pay the piper sooner rather than later. And I'll tell you another thing. The mood in Washington has changed vis-a-vis whistleblowing. I've been a part of the whistleblower community since 2012. It's usually a lonely place to be.
I imagine.
That's not a good thing. Lately, that has changed. I went to a book launch a week ago. 2 IRS whistleblowers wrote a book about their whistleblowing and how they were threatened. This was by the Biden administration. They're the 2 IRS investigators, and these guys are civil servants. They are utterly apolitical, completely and totally apolitical. And so sorry, I'm going to shut this off. They reported to their superiors that Hunter Biden had spent $10,000 at a sex club and tried to write it off as a country club membership when it was strictly for sex and for booze. And they were told specifically, do not file a charge. And so they got together and they said, we would be remiss if we didn't file the charge. Although if we file a charge, we're going to lose our jobs. They filed the charge. They lost their jobs. They went straight to Capitol Hill. Not only were they reinstated, but Hunter Biden was, of course, charged with a crime to which he pleaded guilty. He was guilty, and he knew he was guilty. Well, at this book launch party, instead of just a couple of whistleblowers standing alone, feeling sorry for themselves, the Secretary of the Treasury showed up. Chairman Comer showed up. Chairman Jordan showed up. The media came. And it was a real celebration of truth-telling. I've never been to a whistleblower event like this before. Usually it's all the same faces. We all give each other hugs and talk about what sad sacks we are. This was a celebration. So the tide has turned in Washington. And if Tim Walz thinks that he could talk his way out of this, he's in for a very rude awakening. Like I said, I would be prepared, if I were Tim Walz, to face charges in a federal court. I would want an A-list attorney by my side.
Yeah. Over the weekend, Elon Musk, who rarely does interviews, did a very long interview. And I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's over 90 minutes. But let me just show a clip where he shared something that I've never heard before that came out of Doge that kind of made my blood boil. Let me pull this up and we'll watch it together.
But it turns out when you stop fraudulent and wasteful payments, the fraudsters don't confess to this. They actually start yelling all sorts of nonsense that you're stopping essential payments to needy people. Mm-hmm. But actually you're not. Mm-hmm. We get this thing like saying, oh, you've got to send this thing for whatever, it'd really be like, this is going to children in Africa. And I'm like, yeah, but then why are the wiring instructions for Deloitte and Touche in Washington, D.C.? Because that's not Africa.
All right. So he shared one more thing that didn't make it into this clip. I apologize. But he said, since the early 2000s, the American taxpayer has had $2.3 trillion lost to, oops, we just overspent money.
Yes.
That's insane. $2.3 trillion because Washington, D.C. is incompetent when it comes to our money.
Yeah, I've actually seen that figure a number of times before he said it. 2.3 trillion with a T dollars. A lot of that is, of course, DOD money, because year after year after year, and I mean, you can set your watches to it, Congress appropriates more money than the Pentagon asks for because they want to show how tough they are on defense. And then the money just disappears. There were 3 consecutive years in the last decade when PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a competitor of Deloitte and Touche, was asked to do an internal audit at the Pentagon. And after 3 years, they threw up their hands and they said, we can't find the money. It's just gone. And what we're talking about altogether is actually more than $20 trillion. The 2.3 trillion is just in the last few years.
Yeah, he said that was just, oops, we overspent money.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he pointed out in the clip I did show you, he said, most of these things are set up to pull at your heartstrings, feeding starving children in Africa.
Yes.
Getting rid of bot flies that eat children's eyes. Then the money is always paid to Washington, D.C. And you see that with this Somalia fraud, where it was like feeding hungry children during COVID, children with autism, homeless people getting money, but in reality, it was literally just going back to terrorism.
Unbelievable. Yeah, inexcusable. And this is one of those things where you can't prosecute Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, right? The welfare queen who was getting checks for 18 children and driving an Eldorado Cadillac. This is systemic fraud. It's not just, there's some bad guys out there that are getting checks that they're not entitled to. This is where the entire system of the state of Minnesota was corrupted. And again, not just corrupted, but financing terrorist groups that kill Americans. I have to say, the Shabab people, the Al-Qaeda people, the ISIS people, they have to be laughing at us right now because they use our money to kill us.
Yeah. Well, like the Taliban.
Yeah.
Oh, look, another airplane with $40 million in cash right on time. I sure love America.
Yep.
Just laughing all the way home with our equipment and our taxpayer money. The fact that Tim Burchett, who I've just loved this guy, he's such a straight shooter. He's like, dude, Washington, D.C. doesn't even want to turn off $40 million to the Taliban. That's how corrupt they are. So somebody's getting a kickback of that 40 million every week.
Oh, listen, Stephen, it's not an accident that before 9/11, the heaviest concentration of millionaires per capita in America was in Silicon Valley. And after 9/11, the heaviest concentration of millionaires per capita is right here in Washington, D.C. A lot of people got rich on 9/11. A lot.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah. You mentioned that there's this like shift in energy around whistleblowers. I feel like there's also this shift in energy of Americans going, why is my money going to foreign countries? Why is my money going to foreign wars? Mm-hmm. And I think that they're fed up with it. I think that they're saying, wait a minute, no more. But I want to get your thoughts on this. So after the Minnesota stuff comes out, and now it seems like every day they're finding hundreds of millions of more. But President Trump said he doesn't want asylum seekers from third world countries coming to America with no skills, living off the American taxpayer. And he said America will no longer be the world's dumping grounds. Your thoughts on this? Is this too harsh? Is this the right move? Is it in between?
No, this is the right move. I'm going to use Greece as a comparison because I know Greece intimately. The Greeks, because they're members of the European Union, are compelled to take refugees. Okay? They don't like it. They resist as best they can. They were signatories to the European Union's deal with the government of Turkey to pay the Turks to keep the refugees on Turkish soil. in the under the cover of darkness, the Turks just put them on boats and send them to Greece, in part to help crash the Greek economy. So number one, the Greek economy is not very good. Number two, the Greeks are compelled to accept these refugees who have no skills and can't read and write Greek, and most of them can't read and write English. They're not going to contribute to the economy. At the same time, that economy is so bad that tens of thousands of educated Greeks leave the country every year for other European Union countries where they can make a living, or for the United States, Canada, or Australia. There were even 1,500 Greek professionals last year who sought employment in Turkey, just to give you an idea of how hard things can be over there. And then in the meantime, at least population-wise, they're being replaced by refugees who are serious drains on the local economy. Well, listen, I have, a place in my heart for refugees too. My own grandparents were economic refugees in 1931 and 1932. So I understand everybody wants the best possible life for their families, but at the same time, you have to be able to contribute something to that country. You have to be able to contribute something to that economy. You can't just come and say, okay, I'm here, turn on the flow of welfare checks. That's not what being a refugee should be about. And if there are people like Somalis in this case who are not only not contributing to the United States, they're not part of the melting pot, they're not contributing to the economy or to the body politic, and indeed are actively working against the United States and against Americans by financing a murderous terrorist group like Al-Shabaab, then the answer has to be not just no, but hell no.
What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments in your pocket and finally getting a little breathing room. It's possible when you call American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by everyday expenses, groceries, gas, bills piling up, you're not alone. Most Americans are putting these expenses on a credit card, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. American Financing can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off your debt. You need to call American Financing today before you get to a point where you can't make these payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure their loans and consolidate debt, all without upfront fees. And their customers are saving on average $800 a month. That's like a $10,000 a year raise by being smarter with your money. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. Call now before it's late at 888-686-8030. That's 888-686-8030, or visit americanfinancing.net/Gardner. All right, let me switch gears with you. One of the biggest stories in the news right now is President Trump is doing this pressure campaign on Venezuela.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand what it is. Some people are telling me this is about oil. Some are telling me this is about redirecting Venezuela away from China and Iran. Others say this is about election fraud. Some say it's all of that. What are your thoughts on this? Because it came out in the media that Maduro called President Trump and begged him, please give me money and time to get out of here. So, and then
Right.
2 weeks ago, I reported on my show
Right.
that he said, I will give you trillions of dollars in resources if you leave me alone. So like, what is happening behind the scenes that this man is panicking?
Well, first, Venezuela sits on an ocean of oil. It is very, very dirty oil. It's the highest sulfur content oil in the world. And so it takes specialized refineries to refine that oil and make it pure enough for sale on the international market. Those refineries exist only in Texas. Well, they existed only in Texas until the Chinese government decided to build a refinery in the Caribbean. And so, sure, this is, maybe it's about, democracy, although I think probably not really. Sure, it's about Venezuela's foreign relations with Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, of course. But what this really is about, I think, is a far bigger picture problem that we have with under the radar Chinese expansionism. I'm wearing a suit because I was in kind of a high level meeting today in Washington. And one of the participants asked me where I thought the next big intelligence problem was going to be from. And I said, I think really it's China. I think we're underestimating the fact that the Chinese are swimming in money because they spend so much less on national defense than we do. And they use that money essentially to buy good relations with much of the rest of the world, or most of the third world. And so it hardly costs them anything to say, oh, we'll build a refinery in the Caribbean so we can process that dirty high sulfur oil and we can screw the Americans at the same time. It was the Chinese, getting back to Greece for a second, when the Greeks were at their worst economically a decade ago or so, decade and a half ago, the Chinese swooped in and they purchased the port of Piraeus, which is the biggest cargo port in all of Europe, and the port of Thessaloniki, which is the third busiest cargo port in all of the European Union. They just purchased them. Now both of Greece's main ports are Chinese ports. They purchased the airport in Heraklion, Crete. They purchased the airport in Patras, which is Greece's third city. And they've done that all over Latin America and Africa. Oh, you need a highway? We'll build the highway. You need a port, you need a hospital, you need whatever, a new presidential palace or an airport, we'll build it. We'll own it. You can use it, but we'll build it. And so it's like everybody's indebted to the Chinese now. Well, I think that the president is doing exactly the right thing to try to keep the Chinese at least out of this hemisphere as best he can.
Do you think that's what he's doing with the Middle East as well, where he's deepening relationships with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, that where he's trying to get them to make sure that they turn towards the US and not towards China?
Yes. And I'll tell you another thing. I think it's even more complicated than that. A few years ago during the Biden administration, Kuwait executed an oil contract with China, a massive oil contract that for the very first time ever, the Chinese paid in yuan and not in dollars. That in and of itself could lead to, economic catastrophe in the United States. And so the idea was we need to pay closer attention, not to our political relationships in the Middle East necessarily, but to our economic relationships in the Middle East. And for many decades, really since the Franklin Roosevelt administration, the basis of our relationship with Saudi Arabia has been we sell them weapons and they sell us oil. And that's it. Bringing the Saudis, and by extent the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Tunisians, the Sudanese, even the Moroccans, into the Abraham Accords is a way to strengthen our relations with those countries politically, where our political relations have sort of stumbled over recent years. So whether you like Israel or not, that's a separate issue. The issue is that the president has expanded the depth of our relationship with Arab countries. If that ends up being good for Israel, well, then that's good for Israel. But actually, it's good for us. I think that's what the calculus is.
Okay. So this taking back the Panama Canal in the first couple of months of Trump, like he's just taking back the Panama Canal of the Middle East, of Venezuela, he's doing what he was voted to do, which is to keep the American empire strong, keep the dollar strong, keep our economy from collapsing.
While denying wars of choice. And that's very, very important here. I don't actually think that the president is going to order ground troops into Venezuela. He doesn't get anything from it. I think that we should be attuned to some sort of eventual agreement where Maduro flees, whether it's to Russia or to Cuba. Now, there was a leak a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or so, where Maduro's private pilot said that the CIA had approached him and tried to recruit him so that when Maduro eventually fled, rather than land the plane in Havana, he would land it in Key West, and we could grab Maduro and put him on trial for narcotics trafficking. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. My guess is the president is trying to put as much pressure as possible on Maduro, political pressure on Maduro, to leave, knowing that thousands and thousands of Venezuelans who are in the diaspora would return to Venezuela to help rebuild their country. And at the same time, you keep the Chinese out. I think that's actually a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting to read all of this and cover, because it kind of started in early summer where they took his plane, and then they put a $25 million bounty on his head. And then they moved some ships, 7 ships to the Caribbean. Then they put a $50 million bounty. And now he's calling Mar-a-Lago on the weekend begging, let me get my family out of here. So I don't think Trump wants to go to war. I really believe he wants to be known as the president of peace, not the president of war. But at the same time, his job is to make sure that the US dollar is strong, that China stays in their hemisphere. And I think he's doing a good job. I mean, Stephen, obviously not a perfect job, but
so many of my friends on the left laugh at the notion that this is a peace president. But by God, look at the facts. He actually is the peace president. Is there war right now between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda? No, there's not, because he negotiated a peace. Is there war now between Cambodia and Thailand over some silly island in the middle of a river that has some ruined temple on it? No, because he negotiated a peace. Did we see nuclear launches between Pakistan and India earlier this year? Of course not, because he negotiated a peace. We tend to focus on Israel. There's not going to be peace in Israel. It's a fact of life. Thank God there's something sort of kind of a ceasefire. There's not peace. But he can easily point to 7 or 8 other places around the world that are not at war right now, because he was able to negotiate a peace. So listen, whether you like the man or not, you have to give him credit for what he's done.
Yeah. Final question. I so much appreciate your time.
Oh, sure.
Why do you think we're having such a hard time winding down the Russia-Ukraine war? Yeah. Because now the latest propaganda, or at least fear writing that I'm seeing out of Europe, is that Putin is trying to destabilize all of Europe. This is why he refuses to bring it to an end. But
because he's so strong that he can do that.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I'm like, wow, he must really be destabilizing you by selling you very affordable oil, which Trump has been mad about. Like, why is America giving so much damn money and you keep buying cheap oil from them, right? He's staying in eastern Ukraine. He hasn't gone into Kiev. He hasn't gone into, other countries. So what are your thoughts on why they're struggling to wind this thing down? Or is that just the nature of war?
Well, I think it's a couple of different reasons. First of all, I think the president really believed during the campaign and in the interim before he took the oath of office for the second time, I think he really believed that he could settle this conflict quickly. The reason that he couldn't is because the Russians just were not willing to offer any concessions. You can't blame Donald Trump for this. I put it on Vladimir Putin. However, the Russians have been adamant from the very beginning that they want Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Crimea. Those are all Russian-speaking provinces anyway, and the Russians have controlled those regions since the very outset of the war. So essentially, the agreement would be the Russians keep what they've taken and the Ukrainians keep everything else, that Ukraine could join the European Union on a fast track application, but they could not join NATO. Well, listen, that's a victory for the United States because they don't have to join NATO. Australia is not in NATO. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Emirates, Japan, South Korea are not in NATO. They have what's called major non-NATO status. That's an official title, major non-NATO status. So all you have to do is just declare Ukraine to have major non-NATO status. The issue is done. It's that easy. The problem, though, besides intransigence on the part of Vladimir Putin, is that the French, the Poles, and the Germans are obsessed with continuing this fight. And as Americans, we don't get anything out of this fight, except that it empties our wallets. So it really is past time to put it to bed. Ukraine's not going to win this war. They're losing it now, even with the tens, hundreds of billions of dollars that the United States has sent over there over the past, 3 or 4 years. They're losing anyway. They don't have the manpower. Russia's a nuclear state. Just agree to the borders as are being proposed, and the thing is done.
Okay, one more bonus question. Don't you kind of get the feeling that Russia wants to trade with the United States, and wouldn't that be a good way to deepen a relationship and maybe not have them so connected to China and Xi Jinping?
Absolutely, yes. 2 years ago, I got invited with a group of 7 other people. 8 of us were invited to lunch with the Russian ambassador here in Washington, D.C. And he told us to prepare to talk at this lunch about ways in which the United States and Russia could cooperate even during a time of war. So I was the only one who was a former intelligence officer. And when it came time for my turn to speak, I said, Your Excellency, I feel very strongly that there are multiple ways in which the United States and Russia could cooperate even in a time of war. And that is counterterrorism, counter-narcotics, and counter-proliferation. I said, there's no downside to us having intelligence exchanges on these 3 issues. And then we moved on to things that, like, why are we not able to get there? And I said, look, when you arrest a black female basketball player for having a little bit of weed oil and you give her 10 years at hard labor, it's a bad look. It's just a bad look. And he said, do you know how many Russians are in American prisons right now? I'll tell you, 1,500. And I know because my people have to go visit them. And I said, I'm sure that that's true, but be that as it may, here in the United States, it's just a bad look.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything ever came out of that, but every one of the 8 of us did have ideas where we could cooperate and strengthen the relationship. Once the war is done, there's no reason why we can't go back to the way things were before the war. Yes, Europe should be buying Russian natural gas, and that's less natural gas to go to China or to go to Iran. We should be trading with Russia because, number one, sanctions don't work. They've never worked. Just ask, Raul Castro about sanctions. He'll tell you all you want to know. But sanctions don't work. Trade does work. It strengthens the U.S. economy and gives us more leverage because the relationship is pushed to a higher level. Besides the fact that Russia is an officially Christian country that we should have been trying to integrate into the West for the last 30 years.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Excellent insight. I knew you'd be a good guy to ask these questions of. John, if people want to follow you online, where can I point them towards?
Thank you. I'm on Twitter at John Kiriakou. I've got a website, johnkiriakou.com. I'm teaching some classes at something called IV Cyber. That's at ivcyber.com. And I've got podcasts. Deep Program and Deep Focus are on YouTube. And Dead Drop, What Makes a Spy Tick, on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for asking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll put those direct links. We'll have you on again in the future. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. All the best.